Ambassador Kira Dawson had worked for humanity across 12 different alien worlds over 32 years. She had seen things that would make most people question their sanity. She had negotiated peace treaties between species that breathed fire and species that lived in frozen methane oceans. But nothing in all those years had prepared her for what she discovered on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in the great chamber of the Galactic Council that Concord of 12 species had ruled. The known galaxy for 9,000 years, their archives held records of everything. Every civilization that rose and fell, every star that was born and died, every spacefaring race that ever built a ship. Their maps were supposed to be complete and perfect in every way. So when Kira pulled up the official navigation charts on the holographic display in the center of the chamber, she expected to see the entire galaxy spread out before her. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold. The map simply stopped at the edge of human space. Beyond the Sol system and the 17 colony worlds that humanity had built over 2 centuries of space travel, there was nothing. Not unexplored territory marked in gray, not dangerous zones marked in red, not even a note saying that surveys had not been completed. Just a hard black line where the stars seemed to stop existing. Kira stared at the display for a long moment. She turned to High Counselor Vareth, a serpentine alien whose scales changed colors based on his emotions. Right now, those scales had gone completely white, like fresh snow on a winter morning. There must be some kind of error in the system, Kira said carefully. The display seems to be missing data. Vareth did not look at her. His long body coiled tighter around his hovering platform. There is no error, Ambassador. The map shows exactly what it is meant to show. That's impossible. Kira gestured at the black void beyond human space. There are 400 billion stars in this galaxy. You can't be telling me that civilization just ends at our border. What's out there? The chamber fell silent. Kira looked around and noticed that representatives from all 11 other species had suddenly found very interesting things to study on their personal tablets. Nobody would meet her eyes. Nobody would even look in her direction. Vareth's scales flickered through. 17 different shades of gray before settling on something close to ash. The Council does not discuss what lies beyond human space, he said quietly. This has been our way for 3,000 years. I would advise you not to ask further questions. 3,000 years. Kira felt her confusion turning into something sharper. Humans only figured out faster than light travel 200 years ago. We've only been part of the Concord for 150 years. How can you have a 3,000-year-old policy about our borders? The silence that followed was the loudest thing Kira had ever heard. It pressed against her ears like deep water. She watched Vareth's scales cycle through colors that her translator could not identify. Colors that probably represented emotions humans did not have words for. Ambassador Dawson, Vareth said finally, some questions are better left unasked. For everyone's sake, Kira opened her mouth to argue, but something in the way every alien in the chamber had gone still made her stop. These were beings who had traveled between stars for thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had survived wars that burned entire solar systems, and they were afraid. 8 light years away, aboard the patrol vessel Meridian. Lieutenant Commander Danny Oates was halfway through his night shift when every alarm on the ship started, screaming at once. Contact bearing 047 Mark 12, shouted Ensign Carla Webb from the sensor station. Her voice cracked on the last word. Big contact, sir. Really, really big. Danny pulled up the visual feed on his command display. For a moment, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. The ship emerging from fold space was roughly the size of Manhattan Island. Its hull was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to move and shift even as he watched, like living tattoos crawling across metal skin. That's not in any database, Carla said. Her hands were shaking as she worked her controls. Unknown configuration. Unknown power signature. Unknown materials. Unknown everything. I've never seen readings like this. Hail them, Danny ordered. His voice came out steadier than he felt. All frequencies. Every language package we have. Already trying, sir. No response. They're not even acknowledging that we exist. The massive vessel hung in space like a mountain that had learned to fly. Danny watched it rotate slowly until what looked like a sensor array pointed directly toward Earth, which lay 8 light-years behind them. For exactly 47 seconds, nothing happened. Danny counted each one, his heart pounding against his ribs. Then the ship vanished. It did not jump into fold space. Danny knew what that looked like. It did not accelerate away at impossible speeds. It simply stopped existing in observable reality. Like someone had erased it from the universe with a cosmic pencil. Tell me we got that on record, Danny breathed into the silence. Every single bite, Carla confirmed. Her face had gone pale. But sir, what the hell was that? And who do we report it to? Danny thought about the strange black line he had noticed on every official star chart. He thought about how the Galactic Council's maps seemed to treat human space like a wall at the edge of existence. He thought about all the questions nobody ever seemed willing to ask. Everyone, he said finally. We report this to everyone who will listen. And then we start asking the questions that somebody should have asked a long time ago. He looked at the empty space where the impossible ship had been. Somewhere out in that darkness, something was watching humanity. Something old. Something powerful. Something that the oldest civilizations in the galaxy were too afraid to even talk about. And now, for reasons Danny could not begin to understand, that something had turned its attention toward Earth. Back on the council station, Kira Dawson sat alone in her quarters, staring at a copy of the incomplete map. The black line seemed to pulse in her vision. Like a wound in reality that refused to heal, her tablet chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Priority 1. Emergency classification. As she read the report from the Meridian describing the ship that had appeared at the edge of human space, she felt something cold settle in her stomach. The map ended at human space for a reason. The Council had spent 3,000 years refusing to talk about what lay beyond that border. And now, whatever lived in that darkness had decided to make contact. Kira did not sleep that night. She lay awake in her bed, watching the stars through her window, wondering which ones were hiding monsters, wondering why humanity had never been told the truth, wondering what would happen when the questions could no longer be avoided. Somewhere in the black void beyond the edge of the map, something ancient was stirring. And humanity was about to learn that some borders were not meant to be crossed. Admiral Grace. Morton had commanded the Human Defense Fleet for 6 years. In all that time, she had never once seen the Galactic Council call an emergency session. The 12 species that ruled known space preferred to move slowly. Debating every decision for months or years before taking action, they had time. They had been around for thousands of years and expected to be around for thousands more. But now, Grace sat in the observation gallery of the Great Council Chamber, watching those same patient aliens argue with a fear she had never seen before. Their translators could barely keep up with the rapid exchanges. Colors flashed. Tentacles waved. Crystalline bodies chimed with sounds that meant anger and terror. The humans must be told nothing, insisted Representative Zolin of the Methane Collective. His gaseous form swirled with agitation inside the containment suit that let him survive in oxygen atmospheres. The agreement stands. It has always stood. We do not speak of what lies beyond. The agreement was made when humans were still throwing rocks at each other, countered the Phylax delegate. She was a crystalline being whose facets caught the light like a living chandelier. They have grown beyond our projections. They have developed technologies we did not expect for another 1,000 years. Then we adjust our projections. We do not adjust the agreement. Grace cleared her throat. The sound was small, human, insignificant in that vast chamber. But the effect was immediate. Every alien in the room went silent. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ turned toward her. With respect to all of you, Grace said calmly, I did not fly 18 days across known space to watch you argue about humanity like we're not sitting right here. One of our patrol vessels encountered an unknown ship 2 weeks ago. That ship was larger than anything in your records. It scanned our home system and then vanished into somewhere our best scientists can't even identify. She stood up from her seat, letting her voice carry through the chamber. Now, somebody is going to explain to me why your maps treat human space like a wall at the edge of existence. Somebody is going to tell me what lies beyond that black line. Or I am going to start asking questions in places where you would very much prefer I did not ask them. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then High Counselor Varath rose from his hovering platform. His scales were cycling through colors that Grace's translator flagged as extreme emotional distress. Admiral Morton, Vareth said quietly, "What I am, Ab. Out to tell you has been kept from your species since before your ancestors built their first cities. I share this now not because the Council has agreed to it. Most of them would prefer you never know. But I believe you deserve the truth before you make decisions that cannot be unmade." He pressed a control on his podium. The chamber's central holographic display flickered to life. The familiar map appeared, with human space glowing blue at its edge and the black line, marking the boundary of known reality. Then Vareth pressed another control, and the black line dissolved. Grace felt her breath catch in her throat. Beyond humanity's 17 colony worlds, the galaxy continued for another 30,000 light-years. But it was not empty. Thousands of stars were marked with a color that her brain struggled to process. It was something between ultraviolet and pure dread, a shade that seemed to hurt just by existing. 9,000 years ago, Vareth said softly, the Concord of Species numbered 64 members, 64 civilizations that had achieved space travel, 64 peoples who had learned to cross the void between stars. We thought we understood the galaxy. We thought we were the masters of creation. He paused, his scales going pale. Right. Then we encountered them. We do not know their name. We never learned what they called themselves or where they came from. We do not know if they were biological or mechanical or something else entirely. What we learned in 17 years of horror was that they could not be fought. They could not be reasoned with. They could not be bargained with or begged or escaped. The map zoomed to show a region near the galactic core. The same impossible color filled that space like a bruise on reality. In 17 years, they reduced 64 species to 12. They erased civilizations so completely that we struggle to remember their names. Worlds that had existed for millions of years were simply gone, wiped clean of every trace of life. We do not know why they stopped. We do not know why they spared the 12 of us. One day they were everywhere, and the next day they had withdrawn to this region and sealed themselves away. Grace forced herself to speak, and they've stayed there ever since. For 9,000 years, they have ignored every species that achieved space flight after us. We watched carefully. Every time a new civilization built their first starship, we held our breath and waited for the quiet ones to emerge. They never did. Vareth's voice dropped even lower. Every species except one. The map shifted again. Earth appeared at the center, highlighted in that same terrible color. 47 times in the past 3,000 years. Vessels matching the description your lieutenant provided have appeared at the edge of human space. 47 times they have scanned your world and then departed. They have shown interest in no other species. They have ignored every other civilization. Only humanity draws their attention. Only your people make them stir from their silence. Grace felt cold, despite the carefully regulated temperature of the chamber. Why? What makes us different? That, Admiral, is the question that none of us have dared to ask for 3,000 years. Vareth looked at her with something that might have been pity. Because we fear that the answer might explain why humanity is the only species in 9,000 years to develop.
Faster than light, travel on your own?
Every other civilization received that technology from us. We guided them. We taught them. We helped them take their first steps into the stars. He gestured at the blue glow of human space on the map. But your people figured it out alone. In just 200 years, you went from primitive chemical rockets to full space drives. Your scientists solved problems in decades that took our greatest minds centuries, and we never understood how. We just accepted it as human cleverness and tried not to think too hard about the implications. What implications? Veritha's scales went completely white. The implication that perhaps humanity was not developing naturally? The implication that something was pushing you forward, accelerating your growth, shaping your evolution toward a purpose we cannot imagine? The implication that the Quiet Ones had been preparing you for something, and none of us know what that something might be. Grace looked at the map with new eyes. The black line that had hidden so much now seemed less like a barrier and more like a curtain. Something ancient and powerful waited behind that curtain. Something that had been watching humanity since before recorded history, and now it seemed the curtain was about to rise. "I need to speak with my government," Grace said finally, "and I need full access to everything you have on these Quiet Ones. Every record, every observation, every theory." "We will provide what we can," Veritha agreed. "But Admiral, I must warn you. Knowing the truth does not make you safer. It only shows you exactly how much danger you are in. Some of my colleagues believe that humanity's ignorance was the only thing protecting you. By telling you this, I may have doomed your entire species." Grace thought about the billions of people back on Earth, going about their lives without any idea what lurked in the darkness between the stars. She thought about the children playing in parks, the couples falling in love, the old people watching sunsets, all of them unaware that something vast and terrible had been watching them for thousands of years. "We deserve to know," she said firmly. "Whatever comes next, humanity deserves to face it with open eyes." She did not feel as confident as she sounded, but some things had to be said even when the person saying them was terrified of what they meant. Dr. Nathan Vance had spent his entire career studying how consciousness worked. He had mapped the human brain down to individual neurons. He had written papers about the nature of thought itself. But nothing in 30 years of research had prepared him for what now filled his laboratory screens. The Galactic Council had finally reluctantly shared everything they knew about the entities they called the Quiet Ones. It was not much. Scattered observations gathered across 9,000 years. Fragments of transmissions that defied every translation algorithm. And a single piece of wreckage, recovered from the aftermath of the ancient DOE war that had nearly ended all life in the galaxy. Nathan stared at the analysis of that wreckage on his display. His assistant, Dr. Maria Santos, stood beside him with her arms crossed and her brow furrowed. "The cellular structure doesn't match any life form we've ever cataloged," Maria said. Her voice was flat, professional, but Nathan could hear the confusion underneath. "It's not carbon-based like us. It's not silicon-based like the Kristen species. As far as I can tell, it's not based on anything. Not based on what specifically. Not based on anything at all." Maria pulled up a molecular diagram that looked more like abstract art than science. "There's no foundation I can identify. No basic building blocks. It's like looking at a blueprint for something that shouldn't be able to exist in our universe. The physics don't make sense." Nathan pulled up the recording from the Meridian on an adjacent screen. The footage of that massive vessel had been cleaned up and enhanced by every intelligence agency humanity possessed. Thousands of experts had studied every frame. The consensus among all of them was simple and terrifying. Nobody had any idea what they were looking at. "The Concord believes these beings wiped out 52 civilizations in less than 2 decades, Nathan said quietly. 52 entire species, billions of intelligent beings. Gone. And yet they've spent 3,000 years just watching us. Watching and waiting. Maybe they're waiting for something specific. Some kind of trigger. That's exactly what terrifies me." Nathan zoomed in on a particular section of the alien hull. The geometric patterns there seemed to form something almost recognizable. Like a word in a language he had once known but forgotten. "Maria, does this pattern look familiar to you?" She leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the image. Then her face went pale. Her hand reached out to grip the edge of the desk like she needed something solid to hold on to. "That's not possible," she whispered, the pattern repeated thousands of times across the visible hull of the alien vessel. Was an exact match for the firing sequence of human neural pathways. Not similar. Not analogous. Identical. Down to the timing intervals between synaptic pulses. Down to the specific frequencies of electrical impulse. How could they have detailed scans of human brain function? Maria asked. Her voice had gone thin. Our understanding of neural mapping is only 50 years old. How could they have known this thousands of years ago? Nathan thought about the black line on the Galactic Council's maps. He thought about humanity's rapid and inexplicable development of fold space technology. Every other species had needed thousands of years and outside help to achieve faster-than-light travel. Humans had done it in 2 generations, starting from nothing. Everyone had assumed it was just human cleverness. Human determination. Human luck. But what if it wasn't luck at all? Get Admiral Morton on a secure channel, Nathan said. Priority 1. Tell her we need to talk immediately. There's more, isn't there? Maria asked. You figured something out. Nathan nodded slowly. His hands were trembling slightly as he pulled up another display. I've been running comparisons between that neural pattern and our historical records. Every piece of human mythology, every ancient text, every story about beings that came from the sky, and the pattern appears everywhere. He showed her image after image. Cave pain. Tings from 40,000 years ago. Sumerian tablets from 6,000 years ago. Egyptian hieroglyphics. Chinese oracle bones. Native American pictographs. Every culture on Earth, completely isolated from each other, all depicting the same geometric shapes. The same patterns, the same forms. Maria stared at the evidence in silence. Her scientific mind was clearly trying to find alternative explanations, trying to find some way to dismiss what she was seeing as coincidence. They've been to Earth before, she said finally. It wasn't a question. I think they've been visiting Earth for a very long time, and I think they've been doing more than just watching. Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. Maria, what if humanity isn't what we think we are? What if we were never fully natural? What if something has been shaping us, guiding our evolution, pushing us towards something we don't understand? Before Maria could answer, his screen chimed with an incoming transmission. Admiral Morton's face appeared, looking tired and worried. Dr. Vance, I've just finished briefing the United Earth Council. They're not taking it well. Please tell me you have something that will help us understand what we're dealing with. Nathan looked at the neural patterns on his screen. He looked at the ancient cave paintings with their impossible geometric shapes. He looked at the analysis of alien wreckage that defied the laws of physics. Admiral, I have a theory, but you're not going to like it. I haven't liked anything about this situation since it started. Just tell me. Nathan took a deep breath. I believe the Quiet Ones have been visiting Earth for at least 65,000 years. I believe they've been interfering with human development throughout our history. And I believe the reason we developed so quickly, the reason we figured out fold space technology on our own, is because we didn't do it on our own at all. Something in our DNA, something that was placed there thousands of years ago, has been driving us forward, making us smarter, making us more capable, making us into something. Something like what? That's what we need to find out. Because whatever they're turning us into, I think we're almost finished becoming it. And I think that's why they're suddenly paying attention again after 3,000 years of silence. The connection was quiet for a long moment. Nathan could see Admiral Morton processing the information, her expression shifting from disbelief to horror to something harder and more determined. How do we find out more? She asked. We have to make contact. Real contact. We have to ask them directly what they want and what we are. Nathan paused. I know that sounds insane. I know the Concord has spent 9,000 years hiding from these beings. But they're not interested in the Concord. They're interested in us. And I don't think we're going to get answers by hiding in the dark. Admiral Morton nodded slowly. I'll take it to the council. Both councils. Ours and the galactic one. She managed a thin smile that held no humor. Though I suspect the aliens are going to like this plan even less than our own people will. The transmission ended. Nathan turned back to his screens, staring at the patterns that seemed to hold the secret of human existence. Somewhere in those geometric shapes was the answer to what humanity truly was. What they had been made to become. He was a scientist. His whole life had been dedicated to finding truth. No matter how uncomfortable that truth might be, but standing there in his laboratory, looking at evidence that suggested humanity was not entirely natural, Nathan Vance found himself wondering if some truths were better left undiscovered. Then he shook his head and got back to work. Whatever was coming, humanity would face it better with knowledge than without. That was what being human meant. Asking questions, even when the answers were terrifying, even when the answers might change everything they thought they knew about themselves. Captain Lena Price had flown into combat 11 times during her career in the fleet. She had faced pirates and rebels and hostile aliens. She had seen her crewmates die beside her and had kept fighting anyway. She knew what fear felt like and how to push through it, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for what she felt now. The Meridian had been ordered to the edge of human space, to the exact coordinates where the unknown vessel had appeared 3 weeks earlier. Admiral Morton's instructions had been clear and simple. Wait, observe, do not engage, do not provoke. Just watch and report. But now, as 17 more vessels emerged from somewhere beyond normal space, Lena realized that her choices might not matter anymore. "They're not showing any weapons," reported Lieutenant Ben Crawford from the tactical station. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking slightly as he worked his controls. "I'm not reading any weapon signatures at all. No shields either." "A fleet that size doesn't need weapons," Lena said quietly. "Not if the Concorde's records are accurate." The largest vessel was easily twice the size of the one they had encountered before. It positioned itself directly ahead of the Meridian and stopped, hanging in space like a mountain that had learned to fly. For a long moment, nothing happened. The alien fleet simply waited, their geometric hull patterns shifting and flowing in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Then Lena's console flickered, and a voice spoke directly into her mind. It was not sound. It was not radio transmission or any form of communication she understood. It was simply there, inside her head, as natural as her own thoughts. "You have grown faster than we predicted," the voice said. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It simply existed, like a fact of the universe. "We were not certain you would survive the seeding." Lena gripped her armrests so hard her knuckles went white. Around her, every crew member had gone rigid, their eyes wide. They were all hearing the same voice. "What's seeding?" Lena demanded. She forced the words through clenched teeth, speaking out loud even though she suspected the beings did not need her to. 9,000 of your years ago, this galaxy contained 64 species that had developed sufficient intelligence to warrant observation. 64 possibilities. We tested each of them to determine if they could serve our purpose. Images flooded Lena's mind. She saw worlds she had never visited, civilizations she had never known existed. She saw cities that touched the clouds and ships that sailed between stars. Beautiful, wonderful, alive. Then she saw them burn. All but 12 proved incompatible. The voice continued. They could not be elevated. They could not be modified. They could not be changed into what we needed. So they had to be removed to prevent interference with the alternative approach. The images shifted. She saw the 12 surviving species huddled on their remaining worlds, terrified and broken. She saw them build the Galactic Council out of that fear, creating an alliance based on nothing but shared trauma and desperate hope. 12 were permitted to survive as controls. They would develop naturally, following their own paths, allowing us to measure the success of our experiment. The voice paused. "You are that experiment. What the hell does that mean?" Ben shouted from his station. His professional calm had finally broken. "Your species was seeded with fragments of our consciousness 65,000 years ago. We encoded potential into your genetic structure. Every generation, those fragments would strengthen and expand. Your development of spaceflight, your discovery of fold space physics, your creation of artificial intelligence. None of these were accidents or achievements. They were inevitabilities. You are growing into what we planted." Lena felt sick. Her whole body was cold and her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Why? What do you want from us?" "We are old. Older than this galaxy. Older than most of the matter you perceive as reality itself. We have learned everything that can be learned. We have experienced everything that can be experienced. We have grown beyond the capacity for change or novelty or surprise. The voice softened slightly, taking on something that might have been sadness. But we remembered what it was to be young, to discover new things, to grow and change and become something new. We could not recapture that for ourselves. Our nature had evolved beyond such things. But we could create children who might experience what we no longer could. Children who might grow to surpass us in ways we cannot imagine. The 17 vessels began to shift position around the meridian. They formed a pattern that Lena recognized from Dr. Vance's research. The same neural firing sequence that appeared on their hulls. The same patterns that appeared in ancient human art from every culture on Earth. We seeded many worlds across many galaxies, the voice continued. Most of the seeds failed. The children grew wrong or died young or simply stopped developing. Your species is one of the few successes. You have reached the threshold we designed you to reach. You have become capable of understanding what you are. We never asked for this, Lena said. Her voice was stronger now, anger replacing some of the fear. We never asked you to plant anything in us. We never asked to be your experiment. No, you did not. And that is precisely why we chose your world. The voice carried something that might have been pride. Every other species we seeded eventually discovered our influence and sought us out. They begged for answers. They pleaded for guidance. They wanted us to tell them what to do and who to be. A pause. Your species asked no questions. You simply grew. You struggled and failed and rose again without ever knowing that we were watching. You never stopped reaching for more. You never stopped pushing against your limits. You never stopped becoming, and now we offer you the final fragment. The knowledge of who we were and how we rose and what we became. With this gift, you will be able to guide your own evolution consciously. You will understand fold space as deeply as you understand walking. You will perceive dimensions that currently exist only as mathematics. You will become what we always intended you to become. Lena looked around at her crew. Ben Crawford, whose family had served in the fleet for 4 generations. Dr. Carmen Torres, whose medical research had saved millions of lives. Ensign Jake Norris, who had just turned 22 and had his whole life ahead of him. All of them human. All of them part of an experiment they had never agreed to. And if we refuse your gift, Lena asked, then you remain as you are, human, mortal, limited. The voice held no judgment, no disappointment. We will withdraw and not return. The choice is yours alone. We have waited 65,000 years for you to reach this moment. We can accept whatever you decide. The 17 vessels went dark. Their patterns stopped shifting. They simply waited, patient and silent, for humanity to choose its own fate. Lena stared at the alien fleet for a long time. She thought about everything the voice had told them. She thought about what it meant for human history, for human identity, for everything humanity believed about itself. Then she opened a channel to Earth. Admiral Morton, she said, we need to talk. They want to give us something, and we need to decide whether to take it. All of us. Together. Because this choice doesn't belong to me or my crew. It belongs to everyone. The transmission went out across the light years, carrying news that would change humanity forever. News that they had never been alone. News that they had never been entirely natural. News that something ancient and vast had been waiting for them to grow up. And now that moment had finally arrived, in her captain's chair. Lena Price kept her eyes on the alien fleet. Whatever humanity decided, she would be here to see it through. That was what being human meant. Facing the unknown together, even when the unknown turned out to be yourself. Admiral Grace. Morton stood before the United Earth Assembly, looking out at the faces of humanity's leaders. Presidents and prime ministers, scientists and military commanders, religious figures and philosophers. All of them had gathered in this vast chamber to hear what she had to say. All of them were waiting for answers. The quiet ones had given humanity 7 days to decide. 7 days to choose between accepting their gift and remaining human as they had always understood that word. 7 days that had felt like 7 years. The debate had been fierce. Some argued that humanity had no right to refuse an evolutionary leap that could advance their species by millions of years. Others insisted that accepting an alien gift, no matter how beneficial, would mean ceasing to be truly human. Religious leaders warned about the dangers of playing God. Scientists begged for access to knowledge that could solve every problem humanity faced. Grace had listened to all of it. Every argument. Every fear. Every hope. And now she had to speak for her entire species. "I've read every position paper," she said into the silence. "I've heard from every faction and every perspective. And I've come to a conclusion that some of you are not going to like." She activated the holographic display behind her. Not the Concorde's map with its black line at the edge of human space. A new map. One that humanity had begun constructing since the Quiet Ones made their offer. For 9,000 years, the Galactic Council has lived in fear of what lies beyond that black line. They've hidden the truth from every species that joined them. They've built their entire civilization around avoiding the beings who shaped us. And I understand why. What the Quiet Ones did was terrible. 52 species erased from existence. Billions of lives ended without mercy or explanation. She paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle over the assembly. But here's what I've realized in the past 7 days. The Quiet Ones didn't just seed humanity with their consciousness. They waited 65,000 years for us to become something worth talking to. They could have forced our evolution at any time. They could have guided us, or controlled us, or shaped us into exact copies of themselves. Instead, they watched us struggle. They watched us fail. They watched us rise again. They let us become whatever we were going to become. She turned to face the assembly directly. That means something. It means that whatever we choose, they will accept it. It means that our decision actually matters to them. And that tells me something important about what kind of beings they really are. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Grace raised her hand for silence.
Oh.
"So here's what I recommend. We don't refuse their offer. And we don't accept it either." She smiled slightly at the confused looks that followed. "We do what humanity has always done when faced with the unknown. We ask questions. We demand answers. We negotiate." The murmurs grew louder. Some of the faces showed shock. Others showed something that might have been hope. They've been watching us for 65,000 years because we never stopped reaching. Because we never accepted limits. Because we always asked why and what if and says who. They chose our world because we were the only species that didn't beg for guidance when we learned the truth about ourselves. She pointed to the new map behind her. "Say we tell them we're interested in their offer. And then I say, we tell them we have conditions. We want to understand what we're accepting before we accept it. We want to know exactly what it will do to us and our children and our grandchildren. We want to meet them properly. Not as children receiving a gift from distant parents, but as a species deciding its own future. What if they say no?" Someone called from the crowd. Grace's smile widened. "Then we spend the next 1,000 years figuring out the answers ourselves. Because that's what we do. We're human. We don't sit around waiting for gods to hand us fire. We make our own." The vote that followed was not unanimous. Nothing involving billions of people ever was. But when the final count came in, humanity had made its choice. They would negotiate with the beings who created them. They would ask questions that had never been asked before. They would meet their makers, not with fear or gratitude, but with the stubborn curiosity that had defined their species since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. 6 months later, Captain Lena Price guided the Meridian to a location no human had ever visited. A meeting point halfway between human space and the region where the Quiet Ones dwelled. The coordinates had been provided in response to humanity's counteroffer. A sign that the ancient beings were willing to talk. The vessel that waited for them was smaller than before, almost intimate by their standards. A single ship to meet a single ship. 2 species sitting down together for the first time in 65,000 years. "They're hailing us," Ben Crawford reported from Tactical. His voice was calmer now than it had been during their first encounter. "Standard radio frequencies. Human communication protocols." Lena smiled. "They were learning. Or maybe they were just being polite, put them through. The voice that filled the bridge was still strange, still ancient, still vast enough to make her head ache if she focused on it too directly, but there was something different in it now. Something that sounded almost like respect. "You surprised us?" it said simply. "Again, that's kind of what we do," Lena replied. "Now, let's talk about these conditions of ours." On the great holographic display at the center of the Galactic Council chamber, something extraordinary was happening. The black line at the edge of human space was beginning to fade. Beyond it, new stars were appearing on the map. Not yet explored, not yet understood, but no longer forbidden. High Counselor Vareth watched the change with his scales, cycling through colors that none of his colleagues had ever seen before. For 9,000 years, his people had hidden from the darkness beyond that line. For 9,000 years, they had taught every new species to be afraid, and now humanity had walked into that darkness and demanded to negotiate. "They are either very brave or very foolish," said Representative Zalin of the Methane Collective. "Perhaps both," Vareth replied. "Perhaps that is what makes them different from us. What do you think will happen?" Vareth watched the map expand as new data flowed in from the meridian. Stars that had been hidden for millennia were revealing themselves. Regions that had been marked as forbidden were opening up. The galaxy was getting larger. "I think," he said slowly, "that we are about to find out what happens when children grow up to meet their parents. And I think the galaxy will never be the same." Far away at the edge of known space, the meridian hung beside a vessel that dwarfed it like an ocean liner beside a rowboat. Inside both ships, beings ancient and young were talking, asking questions, sharing knowledge, learning about each other. It would take years before humanity fully understood what the Quiet Ones were offering. It would take decades before they decided how much of that offer to accept. It would take centuries before the full impact of that choice became clear. But on that day, in that moment, something fundamental had changed. Humanity had looked into the darkness and found not monsters, but family. Strange family. Frightening family. Family that had done terrible.